December 18th, 1944, 2:47 p.m. Bastogne perimeter, Belgium. The winter sky was a dull, unbroken grey, the kind that seemed to press down on the forested hills and frozen fields like a weight. Snow fell in thick, swirling sheets, accumulating in drifts along the roads and filling the craters left by artillery strikes. Visibility was poor, limited to barely a few hundred meters in any direction, and the wind carried a biting chill that cut through even the heaviest uniforms. It was the sort of weather that slowed movement, dulled senses, and made every decision on the battlefield feel like a gamble. Oberleutnant Klaus Dietrich pressed his eye against the periscope of his Panzer IV, scanning the snow-covered tree line 400 meters ahead. His breath fogged inside the confined space of the turret, and he wiped it away with a gloved hand. 3 years of commanding Panzers across the Eastern Front and through France had taught him to read terrain the way others read newspapers. Every rise, every clump of trees, every shadow carried information about possible ambushes, concealment, and enemy positions. He had learned to anticipate where infantry might hide, where artillery fire would be most effective, and how tanks could exploit or fall victim to the subtle folds in the landscape. That experience was invaluable, but even he knew that war was as much about surprise and human error as it was about experience and discipline. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The forest before him, thin yet dense enough to hide movement, offered the perfect environment for American ambushes. Division intelligence had warned of tank destroyers operating in the sector, and Dietrich's instincts told him that the Ardennes, already a maze of ridges, frozen rivers, and snow-laden trees, would be an ideal hunting ground for such vehicles. He knew their doctrine: concealment, speed, and striking before the enemy could react. But intelligence reports rarely captured the full reality of what awaited on the ground. Through the swirling snow, a movement caught his eye. A vehicle was emerging from the tree line, moving with a velocity he had not seen in combat before. The tracks cut through snow effortlessly, yet the hull appeared almost impossibly light for a vehicle carrying a substantial gun. His first thought was reconnaissance, perhaps an armored car sent to probe German positions. But the silhouette did not match his expectations. The hull was too large for a reconnaissance vehicle, yet its speed far exceeded that of any tank he had ever encountered. Its low profile made it difficult to target, and the turret mounted what appeared to be a 75mm gun, a weapon capable of destroying a Panzer IV with a single well-placed shot. Dietrich's mind raced. What kind of tank moved this quickly? How could a vehicle this thin-skinned survive in the close-range engagements common in forested terrain? He had heard rumors from captured American soldiers about new tank destroyers, light, fast, and armed with guns potent enough to penetrate even the heaviest German armor. But he had never encountered one firsthand. This was not a rumor. This was real, here in the snow, closing rapidly on his position. He adjusted his periscope, tracking the vehicle's approach. The gun was mounted in a fixed turret, but the speed and fluidity of its movement made it almost a blur. His stomach tightened with unease as he considered the tactical situation. The forest offered some cover, but at this range, barely 400 meters, the American vehicle could choose its position, fire, and vanish before he could properly aim. Standard doctrine dictated that he should halt and engage, lining up a shot with the Panzer's gun. Yet the speed of this vehicle made that option uncertain at best, fatal at worst. Dietrich's crew, tense but disciplined, awaited orders. His gunner's eyes were wide, reflecting both fear and anticipation. The loader held a shell in his hands, ready to ram it into the breach, the cold metal almost numb against his fingers. Every man in the turret felt the silent weight of the moment. The snow, the forest, the approaching predator, and the knowledge that a single shot, executed perfectly, could mean survival or destruction. The vehicle advanced with deliberate intent, its tracks churning snow and ice as if mocking the slower Panzers. Dietrich noticed the low silhouette, the skeletal appearance of the hull, and the way the gun tracked smoothly across the forest floor. He recognized then what he had suspected, but did not wish to believe. This was not an armored car, nor an experimental prototype. This was a purpose-built tank destroyer, designed with a philosophy that defied conventional German assumptions. Its designers had accepted light armor in exchange for speed, maneuverability, and the ability to strike first, and, most importantly, to vanish before return fire could threaten it. As the vehicle crested a small rise, Dietrich's hand tightened on the turret traverse. His mind flicked through tactical options: retreat into the trees, attempt to fire on the move, or hold position and hope for luck. Every choice carried risk. The tank destroyer's speed rendered many of his conventional responses ineffective. The air seemed to thrum with tension, the wind whipping snow into ghostly spirals, masking sound and movement, while the American vehicle moved with lethal precision toward an unseen objective. For the first time, Dietrich truly understood the danger posed by this new breed of armored warfare. This was not a direct engagement between equals. This was a predator capable of hunting German tanks with unprecedented efficiency. He realized that the forest, which had once offered protection and opportunity, could now serve as a hunting ground where the fastest vehicle dictated the terms of battle. The implications were chilling. And yet, despite the fear gnawing at him, Dietrich's training and experience kicked in. He ordered his crew to steady, to prepare for rapid engagement, and to anticipate the first shot. Every instinct honed over years of combat screamed that survival would depend not on the thickness of armor, but on quick thinking, precise action, and a recognition of a new reality in armored warfare. As the tank destroyer emerged fully from the trees, moving faster than any tank he had ever faced, Oberleutnant Klaus Dietrich understood, with stark clarity, that the battlefield had changed. "Was ist das?" His gunner, Feldwebel Otto Schmidt, muttered into the intercom. "It looks like they mounted a gun on a truck chassis." Dietrich felt something he had not experienced since the early days in Russia. Confusion mixed with contempt. American tank design had always puzzled him. The high-riding Shermans with their gasoline engines that burned so easily, the undergunned Stuarts that Tiger crews called Ronson lighters because they lit on fire with one shot. But theirs was something else entirely. This looked like desperation, like the Americans had run out of real tanks and started bolting guns onto whatever chassis they could find. The vehicle was moving at speeds he estimated exceeded 50 kilometers per hour across terrain that would challenge most armored vehicles at 20. Its open-top turret meant the crew was exposed to artillery and small arms fire. The hull armor looked so thin that even a 20-millimeter cannon might penetrate it. This was not a tank. This was a target. "Tin can," Dietrich said into the intercom, using the English phrase German tankers had adopted for lightly armored vehicles. "Range 400 meters, high explosive round. This will be easy." He had no way of knowing that in the next 90 seconds, his Panzer IV would become one of 47 German tanks destroyed by these tin cans in the largest single engagement of M18 Hellcat tank destroyers in the European theater. The vehicle racing toward his position was not a desperate improvisation. It was the fastest tracked armored fighting vehicle of World War II, mounting a 76-millimeter gun capable of penetrating his frontal armor at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Klaus Dietrich and thousands of German tankers like him were about to learn a lesson in American tactical philosophy that would shatter every assumption they held about armored warfare. Speed was armor. Mobility was survival. And the thin-skinned vehicle they dismissed as a tin can was about to rewrite the rules of tank destroyer operations. The story of German tanker confidence in December 1944 was written in 3 years of tactical success and technological superiority. From the steppes of Russia to the hedgerows of Normandy, German tank crews had operated under fundamental assumptions about armored warfare that seemed validated by experience. German doctrine emphasized armor protection and gunpowder over mobility. The Tiger I, with its 88-millimeter gun and 100-millimeter frontals armor, could destroy any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters while remaining effectively immune to return fire. The Panther, with its sloped 75mm armor and high-velocity, long-barreled gun, combined protection and firepower in what many historians consider the best tank design of the war. Even the workhorse Panzer IV, though increasingly outclassed by 1944, mounted respectable 75mm armor on the front hull and turret. German tankers had learned through bitter experience in Russia that armor thickness meant survival. Crews that survived their first battles did so because their tanks could absorb punishment that would destroy lighter vehicles. This doctrine created a psychological foundation that would prove catastrophic when facing American tank destroyers. German crews assessed threats based on armor thickness and gun size. A vehicle with thin armor was assumed to be vulnerable and therefore not dangerous. A vehicle moving fast was assumed to be reconnaissance, not a primary combat threat. These assumptions had served them well against Soviet tank destroyers like the Su-76 and Su-85, which were well-armored but slow. The American M18 Hellcat violated every principle of armored vehicle design that German crews understood. Its armor maxed out at 25mm on the turret front, 12mm on the hull sides. For comparison, the Panzer IV had 80mm of frontal armor. The Tiger had 120mm. 25mm was what German commanders armored their half-tracks with, not their primary combat vehicles. German intelligence reports from France in summer 1944 had mentioned fast American tank destroyers with open-top turrets. These reports were filed alongside observations about Sherman tanks and dismissed as further evidence of American preference for quantity over quality. German tactical doctrine assumed that lightly armored vehicles would be used in reconnaissance roles or as makeshift solutions to equipment shortages. What German intelligence failed to understand was that the M18 represented a completely different philosophy of armored warfare, one that prioritized mobility and ambush tactics over armor protection and sustained engagement. The Americans had not built a weak tank. They had built something that was not a tank at all. The M18 Hellcats development began not with engineering specifications, but with a tactical crisis. In May 1940, German panzers smashed through French defenses using speed, surprise, and concentrated armor. The Blitzkrieg demonstrated that tanks used in mass could break through defensive lines before defenders could react. American military theorists studying the French collapse concluded that stopping concentrated armor attacks required dedicated, mobile anti-tank forces. Traditional towed anti-tank guns were too slow to redeploy when the enemy shifted attack vectors. Heavy tanks were too slow to intercept fast-moving panzer formations. What was needed was a new category of vehicle: the tank destroyer. The tank destroyer force was established in November 1941 with a specific doctrine: seek, strike, and destroy. Tank destroyers would not fight defensively from prepared positions. They would aggressively hunt enemy armor, using speed and surprise to achieve advantageous positions before enemy tanks could react. The doctrine assumed that mobility would provide the tactical advantage that heavy armor provided German tanks. Development of the M18 began in January 1943 at the Buick Motor Division of General Motors. The project designation was T-70, and the requirements were unprecedented. The vehicle needed to reach speeds exceeding 55 miles per hour on roads, 40 miles per hour cross-country. It needed sufficient firepower to defeat German medium tanks at combat ranges. And it needed to be light enough to achieve these speeds while maintaining reliability. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The engineering challenges were immense. No tracked vehicle had ever achieved 55 miles per hour. The Wright Continental R975 C4 engine produced 400 horsepower, giving the M18 an astonishing power-to-weight ratio of 23.8 horsepower per ton. For comparison, the Sherman's ratio was 11.7 horsepower per ton. The Panther managed 13.2. The M18 had nearly double the Sherman's power-to-weight ratio. The transmission was a Cadillac Hydromatic automatic, the same type used in Cadillac automobiles, but modified for the extreme stresses of a combat vehicle. This gave the M18 smooth acceleration and ease of operation the German tank transmissions, with their complex manual gearboxes, could not match. The armor was deliberately thin to save weight. Maximum thickness was 25 millimeters at 60 degrees on the turret front, 12 millimeters on the hull sides. This made the M18 vulnerable to almost any anti-tank weapon. A German 75mm high-explosive shell could penetrate the M18's armor at any range. Even heavy machine guns posed a threat to the hull sides. The crews called it a tin can or paper tank. But this vulnerability was accepted as the price of speed. Tank destroyer doctrine emphasized that the best armor was not being where the enemy was shooting. The 76mm M1A1 gun was the M18's primary weapon. This was the same gun mounted on late-model Sherman tanks, firing the same ammunition. The M62 armor-piercing capped ballistic cap round could penetrate 109 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. The newer T4 high-velocity armor-piercing round, introduced in late 1944, could penetrate 133 millimeters at the same range. These penetration values meant the M18 could destroy any German tank from frontal angles at combat ranges, including the Panther and even the Tiger if hitting weak points or at close range. The Germans had assumed American 76mm guns were low-velocity infantry support weapons. They were wrong. The first M18 Hellcats arrived in Europe in July 1944. The 815th Tank Destroyer Battalion received 18 Hellcats and was attached to 3rd Army under General Patton. The crews had trained extensively at Camp Hood, Texas, but nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of facing German armor. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper commanded one of the first Hellcats to see combat. On July 26, 1944, near Roncy, France, his platoon encountered elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division attempting to escape the Falaise pocket. What happened next was captured in his after-action report. We were positioned in a sunken road approximately 600 meters from the main highway when the Germans came into view, 15 to 20 vehicles, including what appeared to be Panther tanks. My gunner, Sergeant Jackson, acquired the lead Panther and fired. The round struck the hull side and penetrated. The Panther stopped and began burning. We immediately repositioned approximately 200 meters east using the sunken road for cover. By the time the remaining Panthers oriented to our original position, we had acquired a second target from our new position. We destroyed 4 Panthers in approximately 12 minutes before withdrawing. The Germans never effectively engaged us because we were moving faster than they could reorient their turrets. This engagement demonstrated the Hellcats' intended use: speed to achieve ambush positions, firepower to kill German armor, mobility to withdraw before the enemy could coordinate effective response. The M18 was not designed to slug it out with German heavy tanks. It was designed to shoot and scoot, to be somewhere else before the Germans could shoot back. German after-action reports from these early encounters showed confusion about what they were facing. Units reported being engaged by fast American anti-tank guns or armored reconnaissance vehicles with unexpectedly powerful weapons. The open-top turret led some German crews to believe they were facing modified self-propelled guns rather than dedicated tank destroyers. This confusion was tactically significant. German doctrine for engaging different vehicle types varied. Tanks were engaged at maximum range with armor-piercing rounds. Reconnaissance vehicles were often ignored unless they posed immediate threats, and self-propelled guns were engaged with indirect fire or flanking maneuvers. The M18, being none of these categories exactly, fit no established response doctrine. By August 1944, approximately 240 Hellcats were operational in the European theatre, organized into 12 tank destroyer battalions. Patton's Third Army, advancing rapidly across France, used Hellcats extensively for screening operations and flank security. The speed advantage proved decisive in fluid combat. Hellcats could keep pace with advancing armor columns, something towed anti-tank guns and even Sherman tanks struggled to do. The 603rd Tank Destroyer Battalion recorded particularly impressive results in August. Operating with the 4th Armored Division during the drive toward Metz, they destroyed 53 confirmed German armored vehicles in 3 weeks while losing only 6 Hellcats. The kill ratio was remarkable, but what impressed tactical commanders more was the Hellcats' ability to engage and disengage at will. German armor could rarely force Hellcats into sustained combat. The largest single engagement of M18 Hellcats occurred on December 18, 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge. The 605th Tank Destroyer Battalion, attached to the 10th Armored Division, held positions on the eastern approaches to Bastogne. German intelligence had identified this sector as lightly held, suitable for exploitation by armored columns. Kampfgruppe Kunkel, built around the remnants of the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, attacked at dawn. The force included 47 tanks, 23 Panzer IVs, 19 Panthers, and 5 Tiger Is. Supporting elements included mechanized infantry, half-tracks, and self-propelled artillery. The German plan called for a rapid breakthrough to seize the road junction at Bastogne before American reinforcements arrived. The 605th Tank Destroyer Battalion had 18 M and 18 Hellcats positioned across a 5-kilometer front. Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Harker had studied the terrain carefully. The rolling hills and scattered forests provided multiple hull-down positions. The road network, though primitive, allowed rapid repositioning. Harker positioned his Hellcats in 3 platoons of 6 vehicles each, with orders to engage from ambush and immediately withdraw to alternate positions. The German attack began at 027:15 hours. The lead elements, Panzer IVs from Panzer Regiment 15, advanced in column formation along the main road. The 1st Hellcat platoon, commanded by Captain Robert Early, held fire until the German column closed to 400 meters. Then 6 76mm guns fired nearly simultaneously. The German column's lead tank exploded as a T4 high-velocity armor-piercing round penetrated the turret ring. The 2nd tank lost a track and slewed sideways, blocking the road. The 3rd and 4th tanks were hit in rapid succession. In 30 seconds, the German advance guard lost 4 tanks. By the time surviving Panthers brought their guns to bear, the Hellcats had withdrawn to positions 800 meters east. What happened next was a masterclass in mobile tank destroyer tactics. The Hellcats never remained static long enough for German crews to coordinate effective counterfire. They would fire 2 to 3 rounds from a position, then withdraw while another platoon engaged from a different angle. The terrain and weather, the same conditions that favored German infiltration tactics, worked equally well for the defenders. German radio traffic, intercepted and later translated, showed escalating confusion. Commanders reported being engaged by American armor from multiple directions, but could rarely maintain contact with attacking units long enough to coordinate responses. Several Panthers were hit from flank angles as they oriented to engage Hellcats that had already repositioned. The engagement lasted 6 hours. By 13:15 hours, Kampfgruppe Kunkel had lost 47 tanks, 21 Panzer IVs, 23 Panthers, and 3 Tiger Is. The 605th Tank Destroyer Battalion lost 2 Hellcats destroyed and 4 damaged, but repairable. American infantry, supported by the Hellcats' devastating fire support, held all positions. The kill ratio of 23.5 to 1 was exceptional even by tank destroyer standards. But more significant was the tactical paralysis the Hellcats created. German commanders could not develop effective responses to threats that appeared, killed, and vanished in under 2 minutes. The speed advantage, combined with favorable terrain and well-planned firing positions, created a tactical environment where German armor superiority meant nothing. After action reports from Kampfgruppe Kunkel revealed the psychological shock German crews experienced. These were not inexperienced soldiers. Many had fought on the Eastern Front, where they had faced Soviet armor in large numbers. They understood ambush tactics and had countered them effectively against Soviet tank destroyers. But the M18 was different. Soviet tank destroyers like the Su-85 were heavily armored and relatively slow. German doctrine for engaging them emphasized using superior mobility to achieve flanking positions. This worked against the Soviet vehicles, which could not reposition fast enough to counter flanking maneuvers. The Hellcats' speed eliminated this tactical option. German Panthers could reach maximum speeds of 46 kilometers per hour on roads, 24 kilometers per hour cross-country. The M18 could exceed 88 kilometers per hour on roads, 64 kilometers per hour cross-country. By the time German commanders identified a Hellcat position and maneuvered to flank it, the Hellcat was gone. German intelligence officers examining knocked-out Hellcats were baffled by the design philosophy. The thin armor seemed incomprehensible. Surely the Americans understood that 25 millimeters would not stop any anti-tank weapon. The open-top turret left crews exposed to artillery and airburst munitions. The automatic transmission, while smooth, seemed unnecessarily complex compared to German manual transmissions. Technical assessment reports sent to OKH, the German Army High Command, struggled to categorize the M18. It was not a tank, lacking the armor for sustained combat. It was not a self-propelled gun, as it carried armor-piercing ammunition and was clearly intended for direct fire against armor. It was not reconnaissance, as it mounted a gun capable of destroying heavy tanks. The M18 fit no established category in German tactical doctrine. This categorical confusion had operational consequences. German unit commanders received no standardized training on how to counter Hellcats. Some units treated them as light tanks and attempted to engage at range. Others treated them as reconnaissance vehicles and bypassed them when possible. Neither approach was effective. The Hellcats killed from ambush regardless of how German commanders categorized them. Interrogations of captured Hellcat crew members added to German confusion. The crews openly acknowledged their vehicles' thin armor and vulnerability. They described tactics that emphasized avoiding prolonged engagements and never fighting from static positions. This seemed backwards to German tankers, who were trained that static defensive positions with good fields of fire were ideal for anti-tank weapons. The American philosophy, that mobility provided better protection than armor, fundamentally contradicted German armored doctrine. German design emphasized thick armor to survive hits and powerful guns to kill at range. The M18 emphasized speed to avoid being hit and sufficient firepower to kill from ambush. Both philosophies could work, but German crews trained in one philosophy struggled to counter an enemy using the other. Production statistics revealed another dimension of American tank destroyer capability that German intelligence found deeply troubling. By December 1944, American factories had produced 2,507 M18 Hellcats. Buick Motor Division's facility in Flint, Michigan, was producing the vehicles at a rate exceeding 100 per month. The assembly line could complete a Hellcat in approximately half the time required to build a Sherman. Compare this to German production. Total Tiger I production for the entire war: 1,347 units. Total King Tiger production, 492 units. Total Panther production, approximately 6,000 units. By late 1944, German factories were producing fewer than 100 tanks per month across all types, and this number was declining as Allied bombing disrupted production. The production disparity meant that even with favorable kill ratios, German armor strength was declining irreversibly, while American strength increased. Every destroyed Hellcat was replaced within weeks. Every destroyed German tank represented a permanent loss the Reich could not replace. More troubling for German commanders was the logistical sustainability of Hellcat operations. The Wright Continental engine, while powerful, was reliable and easy to maintain. The automatic transmission required less maintenance than German manual transmissions. The vehicle's relatively low weight reduced wear on running gear. Hellcat battalions maintained operational readiness rates exceeding 75%, higher than most German Panzer units by late 1944. Captured maintenance logs from American tank destroyer battalions showed systematic approaches to vehicle maintenance that German units, operating with limited spare parts and fuel, could not match. Hellcats received regular engine services, track replacements, and suspension maintenance, according to fixed schedules. German units, by contrast, often ran vehicles until they broke down, then cannibalized parts from other vehicles to keep a smaller number operational. The fuel consumption comparison was equally stark. The M18's fuel efficiency, approximately 1.3 miles per gallon, was poor by civilian standards, but excellent for a combat vehicle of its power. A Hellcat could operate for approximately 100 miles on a full fuel load. The Panther, with its complex Maybach engine and heavy weight, achieved approximately 0.6 miles per gallon and had an operational range of approximately 60 miles. This meant Hellcat units could execute deep raids and rapid repositioning. The German armor, constantly concerned about fuel shortages, could not match. American logistics provided regular fuel resupply. German units often spent days stationary, waiting for fuel convoys that never arrived. By January 1945, some German units had developed tactics specifically for engaging Hellcats. These tactics, emphasized to the M18, could not do: fight sustained engagements or defend static positions. German commanders began using combined arms approaches, employing artillery and infantry to fix Hellcat positions so that German armor could engage them before they could withdraw. Panzer Grenadier Regiment 15 developed a tactic they called the hammer and anvil. Infantry would assault Hellcat positions with anti-tank weapons, forcing the vehicles to displace. German armor, positioned in depth, would attempt to engage withdrawing Hellcats before they could reach cover. This tactic achieved some success, but required coordination and communication capabilities that German units increasingly lacked as the war progressed. The more common German response was simply avoiding areas where Hellcats were known to operate. Tank commanders, knowing their Panthers could not outrun Hellcats, and that engaging them thwarted the American vehicles' hit-and-run tactics, often requested alternate routes when scouts reported Hellcat presence. This defensive mentality represented a complete reversal of German armored doctrine, which had always emphasized aggressive action. The psychological impact on German tank crews was significant. Men who had operated Tigers and Panthers with confidence against Soviet armor found themselves reluctant to engage American tank destroyers that looked like they could be destroyed with heavy machine gun fire. The knowledge that thin armor did not mean ineffective firepower created hesitation that often proved fatal. Some German veterans later reported that encountering Hellcats was more stressful than facing Soviet heavy tanks like the IS-2. Soviet heavy tanks were dangerous but predictable. They were slow-moving and fought from static positions. Hellcats appeared suddenly, killed and vanished before effective counterfire was possible. The unpredictability was psychologically devastating. The final months of the war saw Hellcats participating in the rapid advances across Germany. Their speed made them ideal for exploitation operations and pursuit of retreating German forces. The given 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, operating with the 2nd Armored Division, covered over 200 kilometers in 5 days during the March 1945 offensive, destroying 26 German tanks and 11 self-propelled guns while losing only 3 Hellcats. German commanders during this period faced an impossible situation. Their surviving armor was spread thin across multiple fronts. Fuel shortages, limited mobility, and American tank destroyers could appear anywhere, moving faster than German intelligence could track their positions. Several German Panzer units surrendered after being outmaneuvered by Hellcat-equipped American forces. Choosing capture over fighting battles they could not win. The contrast with American operations was stark. Hellcat battalions maintained high operational readiness and aggressive tactics through to Germany's surrender. The 638th Tank Destroyer Battalion destroyed its last German tank, a Panzer IV, on May 7th, 1945, near Pilsen, Czechoslovakia. The crew reported the German tank crew attempted to surrender before shots were fired, seeing the Hellcat approach and knowing they could not outrun it. The M18 Hellcat achieved a remarkable combat record. Tank destroyer battalions equipped with Hellcats are credited with destroying over 2,000 German armored vehicles during the war. The 613th Tank Destroyer Battalion alone destroyed over 150 German tanks and self-propelled guns. The kill-to-loss ratio for Hellcats exceeded 5-to-1 across all units, exceptional for armored combat. More significantly, the Hellcat validated the American tank destroyer doctrine of mobility over protection. While German doctrine emphasized survivability through armor thickness, American doctrine emphasized survivability through not being where the enemy was shooting. Both approaches could be effective, but in the fluid combat of late-war Europe, the American approach proved more adaptable to changing battlefield conditions. German veterans, in post-war interviews, consistently expressed surprise at American tank destroyer effectiveness. Many had assumed thin armor meant ineffective vehicles. The psychological difficulty of accepting that fast, lightly armored vehicles could be more combat effective than heavily armored Tigers represented a fundamental challenge to assumptions German crews had held throughout the war. The technical analysis revealed how completely the Hellcat represented different engineering priorities, where German designers prioritized armor protection and gun power, American designers prioritized reliability, ease of production, and tactical mobility. Both approaches produced combat-effective vehicles, but the American approach proved more sustainable for industrial warfare. Production numbers tell part of the story. 2,507 M18 Hellcats were produced from July 1943 to October 1944. This number exceeded total Tiger production and represented a significant fraction of total German medium and heavy tank production for the same period. The Americans built tank destroyers faster than Germany could build the tanks they were designed to destroy. The M18 Hellcat stands as the fastest tracked armored fighting vehicle of World War II. Its 55-mile-per-hour top speed would not be exceeded by any tracked military vehicle for decades. The engineering that achieved this speed, the powerful engine and automatic transmission, represented automotive technology that Germany did not possess or could not produce at scale. The tactical legacy is equally significant. The Hellcat validated doctrines that emphasized mobility and ambush tactics over armor protection and sustained engagement. Modern armored doctrine continues to emphasize mobility and tactical flexibility, principles the Hellcat demonstrated effectively. The concept that being fast enough to avoid being hit is superior to being armored enough to absorb hits remains relevant in contemporary armor design. For German tankers, the Hellcat represented a technological and psychological shock. They had assumed thin armor meant vulnerability, meant ineffectiveness. The mathematics proved different. A vehicle that could kill from ambush and withdraw before counterfire eliminated the advantage heavy armor provided. Speed became armor when combined with effective tactics and terrain usage. The 47 Panzers destroyed on December 18, 1944 by 18 Hellcats demonstrated this principle definitively. German crews that day learned that their Panthers and Tigers, with armor measured in the hundreds of millimeters, were vulnerable to vehicles with armor measured in tens of millimeters. The tin cans they had dismissed destroyed them before they could bring their superior armor and guns to bear. In the history of armored warfare, the M18 Hellcat occupies a unique position. It was not the most heavily armed vehicle, it was not the best protected, but it was the fastest, and in the hands of well-trained crews using doctrine that emphasized its strengths, it proved devastatingly effective against German armor that on paper should have been superior. The lesson, learned at terrible cost by German tank crews across France, Belgium, and Germany, was simple but profound. In warfare, mobility can be more valuable than protection. Speed can be more important than armor. and assumptions about enemy capabilities based on visible characteristics, like thin armor, can be fatally wrong. The German tankers, who dismissed the Hellcat as a tin can, learned this lesson too late. By the time they understood what they were facing, American tank destroyers had already rewritten the rules of armored combat. The hunters had become the hunted, outmaneuvered by vehicles they had assumed were prey, destroyed by guns they had assumed were insufficient. In the end, the M18 Hellcat accomplished exactly what its designers had intended, born not out of a desire to produce the heaviest, most impervious tank on the battlefield, but from a deliberate decision to embrace speed and maneuverability above all else. The Hellcat was an embodiment of a philosophical shift in armored warfare. Its purpose was simple: seek out the enemy, strike from ambush, and do so with such suddenness and accuracy that the opponent could scarcely react. Unlike earlier tank designs, which relied on thick armor and brute force, the Hellcat relied on surprise, mobility, and firepower to achieve results that often seemed disproportionate to its size and apparent fragility. Its designers had understood that in the fast-moving, chaotic environment of mid-20th century combat, a tank that could move faster than the enemy could target, it would be as effective, if not more so, than a heavily armored behemoth lumbering across the battlefield. The engagements of December 1944 in the Ardennes forest during the early days of what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge demonstrated this principle in stark relief. German tank crews, accustomed to facing American M4 Shermans and confident in the superiority of their own Panzer IV and Panthers, initially dismissed the Hellcats as lightly armored reconnaissance vehicles. The thin steel plating, a design concession that allowed the Hellcat to reach unprecedented speeds for a tank destroyer, up to 37 miles per hour on roads and over 25 miles per hour across rough terrain, was derided by many German officers. To them, these tin cans could be penetrated with any competent main gun. They seemed little more than an annoyance on the battlefield. What they failed to appreciate was that armor, while protective, was only one element in the calculus of survival and lethality. The Hellcat's real strength lay in its ability to appear suddenly, fire with lethal accuracy, and vanish before the enemy could return fire effectively. Its 76mm M1 gun, capable of penetrating the frontal armor of most German tanks at combat ranges, combined with an exceptionally low profile and nimble chassis, made it a predator designed to exploit both human and mechanical limitations in enemy operations. In the Ardennes, this combination proved devastating. On the morning of December 17, 1944, a company of M18 Hellcats was deployed along a wooded ridge overlooking a narrow defile where intelligence indicated a German armored column would pass. The American crews, understanding both their strengths and vulnerabilities, concealed themselves amid trees, earthworks, and snowdrifts. Their orders were clear: wait, observe, and strike decisively. The Germans, moving in formation with their panzer divisions, were confident that their armor, numbers, and coordinated doctrine would carry the day. They did not expect ambush. They did not expect the silent predators lying in wait behind the folds of the terrain. When the first Panzer IVs and Panthers entered the kill zone, the Hellcats struck. Guns roared from concealed positions, firing carefully aimed rounds that punctured German armor before the crews had time to react. The first vehicles exploded in fireballs. The second and third followed in rapid succession. Each shot was calculated, each maneuver deliberate. The Hellcats fired from multiple positions along the ridge, then relocated, using speed to avoid return fire. German tank crews, expecting a slower opponent, found themselves struggling to track a vehicle that moved almost impossibly fast relative to their own guns, traverse, and elevation. By the end of the engagement, 47 German tanks had been destroyed. It was a staggering figure, and yet it did not capture the full impact of the Hellcats' effectiveness. Beyond the mechanical destruction, there was a psychological effect. The German tankers who had entered the Ardennes, confident in their armored superiority, left with a profound, demoralizing realization that sometimes the fastest vehicle, not the most heavily armored, dictated the terms of combat. Commanders began to question doctrine, crews hesitated to advance, and the initiative, long held by the German units, shifted decisively. The Hellcats had achieved what they were designed to do. dominate the battlefield through agility, firepower, and the ability to exploit the enemy's assumptions. The lesson was clear and enduring. In modern armored warfare, speed kills. The M18 Hellcat, by sacrificing armor for mobility, had demonstrated a fundamental truth. The battlefield is not merely a contest of steel thickness or gun caliber, but of timing, initiative, and the ability to act faster than the enemy can respond. German tank crews who had dismissed the Hellcats' thin armor as a trivial weakness learned the hard way that speed and positioning could outweigh conventional notions of survivability. The Hellcat's low silhouette, its rapid acceleration, and its ability to shoot and scoot left the Germans with little opportunity to exploit their traditional strengths. Moreover, the operational flexibility of the Hellcat allowed American commanders to employ it in ways that extended beyond tank versus tank engagements. The same speed that protected the vehicle from return fire also enabled rapid redeployment, reconnaissance, and exploitation of breakthroughs. In the Ardennes, Hellcats were able to move swiftly between sectors, reinforce weak points, and maintain pressure on retreating German units. Their mobility turned the battlefield into a dynamic chessboard where every piece could threaten multiple targets in succession, and where hesitation by the enemy could be instantly punished. By the conclusion of the Ardennes engagements, the reputation of the Hellcat was firmly established. 47 Panzers destroyed in a single encounter stood as a testament not merely to the vehicle's firepower, but to the revolutionary concept of trading armor for speed. American crews came to understand that survival depended as much on initiative and rapid maneuver as it did on armor or numbers. German crews, meanwhile, faced a humbling reality: the tactical assumptions upon which they had built confidence. Armored superiority, frontal engagement, and doctrinal predictability were insufficient against a platform designed to exploit every weakness in their approach. The M18 Hellcat's impact did not end with one engagement. Its operational philosophy influenced subsequent American armored doctrine, demonstrating that mobility, surprise, and precision could be leveraged to overcome numerically or materially superior forces. The psychological imprint on German tankers lingered. Units learned to exercise greater caution, to respect American tank destroyers, and to anticipate ambushes that previously would have seemed improbable. In the broader scope of the European theater, the Hellcat's combination of speed and firepower contributed materially to the slowing of German armored advances, the attrition of experienced crews, and the eventual collapse of German armored resistance in the Ardennes and beyond. Ultimately, the M18 Hellcat proved that warfare was no longer solely about armor thickness or the weight of a gun. It proved that understanding one's own strengths, exploiting the enemy's assumptions, and applying speed with precision could yield decisive results. For the German tank crews who dismissed the Hellcats as tin cans, that lesson came too late to matter. By the time they had fully comprehended the Hellcats' potential, the die had been cast. Their tanks lay destroyed in frozen fields, their formations broken, and the momentum of the campaign irrevocably shifted. The Hellcat had done what it was designed to do. It had struck from ambush, destroyed enemy armor faster than it could be replaced, and proved, beyond doubt, that in modern mechanized warfare, speed, initiative, and audacity can be as lethal as any layer of steel. Up next, we have two more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.